Assalamu alaikum, inshallah you well, guys. So you may have started receiving your offers from the firms that you've applied to. And inshallah, if you followed my advice and applied everywhere, you may have plenty of offers to choose from. So inshallah, in today's video, I'm going to speak about the pros and cons of working in industry versus practice as a trainee. The first thing I'm going to speak about is pay. Now, as a trainee, your compensation is likely to include a salary, where you can expect annual pay rises and maybe a bonus as well for completing certain stages of a professional qualification. So in your trainee years, you may be getting an increase in your pay or a bonus payment every 6 to 9 months. And as a graduate, you can reasonably expect to go from around 25 to 30k from when you start to around 40 to 45k within 3 years. And that's a similar story whether you're in industry or in practice. In industry, you may find yourself with a slightly higher base salary, maybe a few £1,000s, but the net impact is likely to be minimal when you take out tax and student loan deductions if you've been to university. The only time I'd advise taking salary into consideration when you're deciding between your offers is if the difference is of around 5k or more. Aside from that, I'd say, guys, focus on making the big bucks later on in your career once you qualify. Secondly, we're going to talk about exams. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're an apprentice or a graduate, you're going to be studying for a professional qualification. And in my opinion, practice is the better place to be if you want to qualify as quickly as possible. If you look at KPMG, they have an intensive study program, and other practice firms will expect you to take some exams within the first few weeks of joining. And in my experiences, I haven't come across many people who are at the senior level or above in practice who aren't qualified. So definitely I'd say in practice, the focus is on getting trainees qualified as quickly as possible within 3 years. Slightly different situation in industry. You have smaller intakes, so there's more flexibility of when you will take your exams, and it's more common to see people in senior positions who aren't qualified. They're qualified by experience. Say it's busy period, you may find yourself under pressure to prioritize work and you'll end up delaying booking your exam. But that wouldn't happen in practice. Once you're booked in to do an exam, that's it. No one's going to expect you to prioritize work over that exam. And that happens because of the different ways of working in industry versus practice. In practice, you book resources to a job. So if your trainee can't work on the job in a particular week because they've got an exam, it's fine. You just book another trainee in, maybe someone who's more experienced. But in industry, you have smaller intakes and trainees are assigned to particular teams. So you may be the only trainee that's assigned to financial accounts. And if it's a busy period and they've got month end going on, it may be a bit frowned upon if you decide to take a week off during that period to go and do your exam. They simply can't just sub someone else in to complete your work. The downside with practice is that the exam policies can be more stringent. So if you have a bad fail or fail an exam multiple times, you may find yourself being fired. And you still have exam policies in industry, but they generally tend to be less stringent. One piece of advice I'd give you guys is when you get your offers, definitely ask for a copy of the exams policy in place. Third, we're going to speak about work experience. And I'd say industry is better in many instances. If you're a trainee in industry, you're likely to be on rotation, which means that you'll spend each year working in a different area within finance. So in your first year, you may be in financial accounts. Your second year, you may be in commercial finance. And in your third year, you may be in internal audit, which means across those 3 years, you build up a broad range of experience across different areas of finance. In practice, you don't have that same level of varied experiences. So if you apply to audit, you're going to stay in audit. And it's the same across other service lines as well. Yes, it is possible to switch service lines during your trainee years, but that's the exception rather than the norm. One piece of advice for apprentices is that you may wish to start your career in practice if you've received an offer in industry within operational finance. So operational finance is where you're working in teams such as credit control, expense payables, accounts payables, and those teams are really responsible for processing invoices, payments, etc. So you may find yourself completing mundane tasks, boring tasks essentially, during your trainee years. If you're a graduate, nothing to worry about there, guys, because you don't really tend to find schemes within operational finance. A thing to be aware of, guys, is that many people leave practice once they're qualified, once they've done their 3 years. And if you plan to move into industry, you may feel like it's better to just start my career in industry so I can get a head start. Don't focus on that too much, guys, because I had the same fear when I qualified. I've completed my training in audit. How am I going to move into accounts or another area within finance? But that's all rubbish. I'd say that if you leave practice, you pick things up quickly within 6 months and definitely won't be behind those who started their career within industry. Also, I may as well speak about busy periods because that always comes up when you're talking about working in practice. And definitely I'd say in industry, there are busy periods, but there's a lot more structure. For example, in industry, you may have to work longer hours during month end, but you'll be aware of that in advance so you can plan your time accordingly. And even if you do end up working longer hours, typically you'll get that time back during earlier finishes across the rest of the month. In practice, I'd say I was regularly working long hours at BDO. The NAO wasn't as intense, but I'd say ignore my experiences at the NAO here, guys, because it's the exception rather than the norm because of the work they do. But at BDO, I'd regularly find myself working around 10 to 12-hour days. Having said that, I recently did 20 hours in a day in industry, but the attitudes are different. In industry, my managers will say, Fez, make sure you get that time back, and it's a highly unusual situation. However, in practice, it's expected without any complaints. The final bit I want to talk about is socials, and with inclusion and diversity becoming increasingly important and larger intakes in practice, you may find that practice is a better environment for you. If you're joining an intake of more than 20 people, you're likely to find at least one person who you can get on with, share your experiences with, moan to about exams, and that's more difficult than joining an intake of, say, 5 people in an office. If you've got an offer and you don't really know about socials in the workplace, don't worry. Go and message other trainees on LinkedIn. Ask them about their experiences. Generally, larger companies will have greater diversity and more societies. I see a lot of I&D-related societies posted regularly from LinkedIn, and they're all from big companies. Inshallah, those are the main factors that you should be focusing on, and other pros and cons, guys, really depend on your personal preferences. Generally speaking, I'd say if you've got good salary, you're studying for a top qualification, you've got good experiences on offer during your trainee years, and plenty of opportunities once you qualify, you're on to a good start. As always, any questions or queries, please feel free to comment below or message me on Instagram.